Okay. So welcome. I'm gonna tell you something about the stuff I've seen during my red teaming. Who am I? My name is Peet. The first 7 years of my career I spent building stuff, and the last 4 years I've been spending, basically breaking stuff, right? Which is an interesting combination. Of course, after the breaking, we still help to improve my clients, and that's what it's all about in the end. We do red team engagements, which means we do an attack on a client as if we were an actual adversary. So we try to use good technique, good tricks, stay out of the blue team, and stuff like that. Operate basically without being detected. We do that in a lot of locations. It's a good thing we like to travel, but as it goes with traveling, yes, you do get sick in India. I also get sick in South Africa. It's not always fun, but overall it's good fun. You get to see a lot of stuff. You get to see a lot of countries, and what interests me the most is actually it doesn't really matter where you go. You see the same kind of problems, which was quite surprising to me. I would expect that in Western Europe or in the US we would be a bit more advanced, maybe a bit more secure than in some other countries. Overall, that's not really the case, what I've seen. Of course, I only come at companies which are actually interested in improving their security, so depending on where you go, your mileage may vary. So keep it in mind during this talk. This is what I've seen during my expeditions, if you will. It's not a broad research. So, classic defense in depth. This is something we're all taught, right? You have your defensive perimeters. This is basically where it comes from. First, you have your moat. You have to get over the moat, get over the walls. Every added layer adds a layer of defense where you can hopefully stop the enemy. In security, we adopted the security onion, the defense in depth layers. The idea is, if you breach maybe the system, then hopefully the operating system. And the different layers in your network will help you to protect your crown jewels, your data, your IP, your transactional systems, whatever it is. But what I found that's works really well if you're being attacked by an army, like a castle would be. But that's generally not the adversary we're facing, right? We're facing an attacker which tries to be stealthy, and like a castle, he's only going to need one back door to be able to get into the castle, so he can social engineer the guards, or he finds a back door. He gets in and then it looks like he belongs. And unless you put additional measures in place, you're not going to stop him, right? So really, we've poked a lot of holes for our clients, or our users who operate here, to actually work on this sensitive data. That's kind of required, right? Why do you have a company otherwise? And those are the holes I discussed. You need your users to be able to work. And so all these layers are really, really cool. But if I can pretend to be a user here or here or here, on any one of these layers, then I can actually get to this data as a normal user would. So what I realize is not so much a castle as it is a pyramid. Right? Any of these security layers, if you will, are required to help you secure. They don't add to the security, but they're actually required to be secure to help secure the crown jewels, which are here kept on top. And if you map that against the layers we've previously discussed, you get to this amazing stack of my own creation. But what I'm trying to tell you is you need all these layers to be secure. It's not like you can just forget one of these layers and then expect the rest to help you secure your systems. That's something I want to discuss with you today. If you can breach any of these layers, which we'll see later can be a little bit easier than you may hope, you'll be able to get to those crown jewels. So my first case is organizations which use endpoints which they don't trust, basically, right? We've seen these with multiple locations. They give users laptops, they don't configure the laptops, or they have just systems standing around for them to log into, or they expect them to work from home. They log into a secured VDI environment and they go from there. So Okay, fine. Right? They use a secured thin client or a laptop or whatever. We saw this at one client, and we were struggling a bit. There was nothing exposed on the network. We only had this VDI portal they could log into. But what we realized is that actually, in the specific case, the thin clients were just sitting there. They were logged in. You didn't log into the thin client. You used the thin client to get to the portal. So what we were able to do one night is hang around a bit, stay until everybody leaves, and then actually compromise the thin clients by just going to them and executing something in user space. So that means that your malware or your implant is running in the user space. You don't have any high privileges, but it's enough to keep an eye on what the user is doing. Now these users are afterwards logging into their VDI environment and using the credentials they have, get to the systems they need to go. So from that point we were able to capture those credentials they were using and actually start escalating in the VDI environment. And the problem here is, it's not really readable through the beamer anymore, but the hardware was completely hardened. We couldn't get into the hardware. And all these upper layers were also completely hardened because you only had this VDI. We couldn't get any credentials for it initially. But because the operating system allowed you to just start up the thing and log in and basically run some low privilege applications, we were able to get an agent running there, basically get in here and move up from there. I hope this kind of makes sense. So the next case, you see that by breaching this layer, everything else fell over basically. The next one was a company where they were, they had an office network. It wasn't all that special, but there wasn't all that interesting data in there either for us. So we were looking to go to their PCI environment, right? Payment card industry. That's where they keep the transactional data, credit card data, stuff like that. That's heavily governed by PCI DSS, the data security standard from the credit card companies, and you're not supposed to just get in there. So this client, they checked all the boxes. They had a VPN connection to that data segment, and they actually protected that with two-factor authentication. So even if you were able to get the credentials, you will still need a token or whatever to get there. So we were thinking, okay, so what can we do? Well, it turned out that actually the administrators administrating the PCI network, they didn't really know how to handle the fact that they were using 2FA or what that actually meant. So they just set up that VPN and kept it open, right? Two-factor authentication can be a pain. You have to use your credentials and then look at your phone or your token and put in the token. And they were like, I'll just keep it up. So instead of protecting you, it actually keeps the session open. And then it was pretty easy for us to just get on their laptop and pivot over their system to get to this PCI network. Right, so the fact that they had two-factor authentication was a great control on paper, but in practice, no one told the admins to actually disconnect after they were done. And then you see again, and then you're a user. We already had the credentials from here. You can just go up in the PCI network. I'm going a bit fast, I see. Let's see. This third case is a 4i principal case. Again, you see a client. The office network was okay, not great. But then the real nice systems, they were behind the 4i principal. So if we wanted to put in a transaction, they actually needed someone else to approve it. Now this is a great control if you're talking about fraud. People just trying to put their own transaction into the system, abusing the system, but it's not a security control. If you don't add anything extra beside the fact that you're using 4i, just the two people logging in, all the information you need to get in the system is found here, which has already been breached. So this 4i principle doesn't really add anything. It just tells me I need to log in twice. Yes. I'm really rushing through my slides. Yeah, so my main story, my main point is you cannot build high security systems on lower security layers, right? If your story is, I don't care too much about my laptops or my endpoints, then that's fine, but you cannot expect the users using those laptops and endpoints to keep your highly secure data secure without adding extra controls. If we go back, if they would have added a two-factor solution here, right, then it would be much harder for me to get into those systems. Then that 4i principle could also be a security control. Even if it could somehow hijack someone's session and get in, that's possible, but you still have to wait for someone to actually do that. And then I have to wait for the second person to do it so I can approve it, which immensely raises the risk that I will be detected. It gives the company time to react. And as we discussed before, there's lots of logging. And I don't know, most of you I think saw I thought I saw a Hexer presentation. There's lots of logging going on. If I try to log into a certain system which turns out to be protected by two-factor, it should pop up in the logs and be alerted. Similarly, if you go back to the PCI network, if the admins were being instructed, look, we're going to put in two-factor authentication for your VPN. We know it's a pain, but it's a security measure, and you're supposed to shut down your VPN when you're done. That's again something that will slow you down as an attacker. It won't prevent you from the attack, but at least it will force you to wait for an admin to go there, log in. It greatly increases the risk that you'll be detected. It will slow you down and give the company time to respond. Similar to the first case, they thought, there's nothing here, we don't have to really secure this. There was no malware detection for our implant to be picked up with. There was no monitoring to see that we were messing around with it. Right? So you see they're building security on top of unsecured systems. Those were my slides. Yes, I see questions.
So on case one.
Yes.
I'm assuming you made recommendations on how to fix things.
Of course.
On case one, what was the solution to stop them from getting into the VDI session or into the... Once you compromised the host,
yeah,
you had access to the VDI session,
correct?
So what was your recommendation to?
So we made a couple of recommendations. One was for them to think about rolling out 2FA, definitely for calling in from the outside, possibly from the inside, which would prevent it. But more so, harden your system like it is a kiosk because you are using it like a kiosk. There's no reason for me to need to be able to execute stuff from a USB drive. Make sure it's not logged in all the time. If you want to use generic accounts, at least make sure it's logged out after people leave and it's not left logged in. And those kinds of recommendations, right? But you have to think about how the company is operating. And you can tell them you cannot do this, but this is something they invested millions in. So you need to find a way to get them aware of the situation. Try to fix as much as you can, but also implement the monitoring to make them aware, to make them see that something's going on. But you cannot completely change their business model. You can try recommending it, but they won't.
You also need a management solution for thin clients, otherwise you cannot patch them from...
Yes. Yes.
Most of those solutions are Windows-based, so imagine with MS 17.10, all
Definitely.
systems are vulnerable. Yeah. You install keyloggers and you go in from anywhere.
Yeah.
So can we go back to the pyramid for a second? Because you mentioned that in one of these cases, I don't exactly remember which one, but that you hung around and you got access to it. That sounds like you had to be... First one? Okay. So that means you had to be there in person, physically
Correct.
present.
Yeah.
Where does that show up in this pyramid?
Well, that's not in this pyramid. Physical security, that's something we also assess. And depending on the engagement we have, we will be inside or outside.
Mm-hmm. But shouldn't that be the foundation that everything's built on? Because if you have physical access, then...
Sure. No, definitely. I mean, hardware is in there, but physical security is kind of a different chapter than what I was discussing here. But definitely, yeah, physical security. If you can touch a device, you have a risk. Yeah.
Don't disagree with you, though. I don't think physical security is everything.
It's not everything, no.
No, I mean, you can literally be inside a building
Yes.
It's parallel, but not a foundation. And we discussed on military networks and also how they use physical segregation. A lot better they use network segregation.
Other questions?
Yes, based on your experience, what is the most successful phishing technique to get an agent on a host, like for remote? Is that emails, or is that or I mean attachments in emails, or is that links to HTAs, or?
So what we use a lot and what still works is either attached documents or tricking a user into downloading a document. And that can be a docx, can be an HTA file. But if you're talking about the most successful, right? I mean, docx, especially docx, which aren't macro disabled, they get picked up a lot faster by anti-phishing software, stuff like that. So mostly we go to, for example, getting someone to go to a portal and download something. It could be signing up for something and getting a flyer, getting a discount, something like that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Because the the spam filters are really keen on getting out malicious attachments. Well, it's sometimes less so for the IDS or something like that.
Any other questions? Still plenty of time left, so. One more. Are you sure? Yeah?
Well, this is the first time I've asked the second question, so I think it's allowed, right?
Let's hear it.
So, this is the current state of affairs. How do you see this changing in the future? As in, is there going to be technologies that you're really looking forward to as to we can start using this? Do you see any changes in the way that you're currently doing your work?
This is not going to be solved with software solutions. This is not going to be solved by technology. This is something that the admins and the architects of your networks and systems need to understand, how sharing your keys in lower and high security systems, it's basically downgrading your high security system, right? It's similar to saying, so this group of admins has this server to manage, and this group of admins has this server to manage, but they all use the same file server, right? You still have your point where you can jump as an attacker. And that's something you need to change in your architecture and your way of thinking. And it's not user-friendly, definitely, and it's something we need to solve. And I don't have a ready-made solution, but it is something we need to talk about.
So you don't think some of the sandboxing that's coming? So you don't think some of the sandboxing that's coming into play in Mac OS now in Windows 10 as well is going to help with that? Because I mean, you do get kind of stuck into one user environment. I mean, to a certain extent, even if you compromise that one user account, doesn't mean you're going to compromise other user accounts.
Yes, but then you're talking about just the endpoint exploitation, and a large part of this is all the lateral movement and the escalation we do in the network, so that's not based isolated to one host, let's say, and definitely it will definitely help, and it's already helping with accidental infections, downloads, and stuff like that. But we would need to see a bigger rollout for that to happen, to have an actual impact. But if you're talking about really targeted attacks, they will find ways to get around that or find another attack which is not sandboxed.
Okay. I think that's it. Thanks, Jos, for your
Thank
talk.
you.